Let me be direct with you from the outset because the situation unfolding along Israel's Mediterranean coastline demands directness. What we are witnessing is not a military offensive aimed at air bases or command centers. It is not a campaign targeting missile batteries or intelligence facilities. What we are witnessing is something far more calculated, far more devastating in its long-term implications, and frankly, something that Western military analysts have been warning about in classified briefings for the past 18 months, but have been reluctant to discuss publicly. I am sitting here looking at damage assessment reports that have been circulating among regional security analysts for the past 72 hours. What these reports document is not the destruction of a single desalination facility. It is not collateral damage from a broader strike campaign. What these reports document is the systematic targeting of 4 major desalination plants along Israel's coast, facilities that together produce approximately 40% of Israel's freshwater supply. 4 strikes. 4 facilities. And according to initial damage assessments from Israeli Water Authority officials, 3 of them are completely offline, with the 4th operating at less than 30% capacity. In the next 18 minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly why this represents a fundamental shift in the strategic calculus of this conflict, why the targeting methodology reveals a level of intelligence gathering and operational planning that most Western analysts did not believe existed in this theater, and why what is happening to Israeli households right now, today, May 13th, will reshape regional security dynamics for the next decade. This is a story about water, yes, but it is more fundamentally a story about vulnerability, about the infrastructure dependencies of modern states, and about how asymmetric warfare has evolved beyond anything we saw in previous conflicts. Subscribe now if you have not already, because what we are about to cover is being actively analyzed by American and European military planners. This is not speculation. This is not conspiracy theory. This is strategic analysis based on open source reporting, official statements, and damage assessments that are now becoming public. Let's start with the infrastructure itself, because most people do not understand just how dependent Israel has become on desalination technology. This is not optional infrastructure. This is existential infrastructure. Israel is a country of approximately 9.7 million people located in one of the most water-scarce regions on Earth. Natural freshwater sources, the Sea of Galilee, the mountain aquifer, the coastal aquifer provide only about 25% of the country's water needs. The remaining 75% comes from 2 sources: desalination plants along the Mediterranean coast and wastewater recycling facilities. Of that 75%, desalination accounts for roughly 80%. That means that approximately 60% of all water consumed in Israel for drinking, for agriculture, for industry comes from 5 large-scale reverse osmosis desalination plants. The plants that were struck are Sorek, the largest desalination facility in the world when it opened, capable of producing 624,000 cubic meters of water per day. Hadera, producing 545,000 cubic meters daily. Ashkelon, producing 392,000 cubic meters, and Ashdod, producing 100,000 cubic meters. Together, these 4 facilities produce more than 1.6 million cubic meters of fresh water every single day. To put that in perspective, the average Israeli household consumes approximately 0.2 cubic meters of water per day. We are talking about the water supply for more than 8 million people being taken offline in a coordinated strike. According to reporting by Haaretz and confirmed by statements from Israeli Water Authority Director Yechezkel Lifshitz, the strikes occurred within a 6-hour window on the night of May 11th into the morning of May 12th. The munitions used were precision-guided, not the kind of improvised rockets we have seen in previous conflicts, but weapons with accuracy measured in single-digit meters. Reuters and multiple regional defense analysts suggest the strike methodology indicates access to detailed facility schematics, real-time operational intelligence, and an understanding of which specific components, the high-pressure pumps, the membrane arrays, the electrical substations, would cause maximum disruption with minimum explosive yield. Commander Yoav Har-Even, former Israeli Navy officer and current infrastructure security consultant, has stated publicly that the level of targeting precision, and I am quoting him directly here, and indicates intelligence penetration we have not seen in any previous conflict with regional actors. That is not hyperbole. That is a professional assessment from someone who spent 30 years defending this exact infrastructure. Subscribe if you are watching this and realizing you are not getting this level of analysis anywhere else. The mainstream media is covering this as a security incident. What we are covering is a strategic inflection point. Now, let's talk about what this actually means on the ground, because the implications are already being felt in ways that go far beyond temporary water rationing. Announcement number one, the immediate humanitarian impact. And this one matters more than anything else happening in this theater right now, because it affects every single Israeli household, regardless of politics, regardless of geography, regardless of socioeconomic status. As of May 13th, the Israeli government has implemented emergency water rationing across all major cities: Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Haifa, Beersheba, Ashdod, Ashkelon. The rationing protocol limits residential water usage to 120 liters per person per day. That is approximately 32 gallons. For context, the average American uses 80 to 100 gallons per day. The average Israeli before the strikes used approximately 65 gallons per day. We are talking about cutting consumption by roughly half. But here is what the news reports are not emphasizing. 120 liters per day is not a guideline. It is a hard cap enforced through automated shutoff valves that were installed in Israeli water infrastructure after the drought of 2013. These valves can remotely limit flow to individual households and buildings. Israeli families are discovering this reality in real time as their taps stop working after they hit their daily quota. The Israel Water Authority has confirmed that as of May 13th, enforcement is mandatory, not voluntary. Agricultural impact is even more severe. According to data from Israel's Ministry of Agriculture, approximately 60% of Israeli agriculture relies on desalinated water, particularly in the Negev region where natural water sources are essentially non-existent. The ministry has announced emergency protocols diverting all available desalinated water to residential and industrial use, which means agricultural allocations have been cut by an estimated 70%. Dr. Eilon Tal, agricultural water management specialist at Tel Aviv University, has stated that if current conditions persist for more than 30 days, Israel will see crop losses in excess of 40% for this growing season, with particular devastation to high water crops like citrus, avocados, and tomatoes. The economic implications are staggering. Israel exports approximately $8 billion in agricultural products annually. A 40% crop loss translates to $3.2 billion in direct economic damage, not counting secondary effects on food processing, transportation, and retail. Bloomberg has reported that Israeli agricultural futures have already dropped 17% in the past 48 hours, with traders pricing in extended disruption. Received. That is announcement number one. Now, stay with me because this is where the narrative completely changes and where the strategic sophistication of this operation becomes impossible to ignore. Announcement number two, the repair timeline is not what you are hearing in official statements. This is the part the Israeli government has been downplaying, but engineering assessments are telling a very different story. Israeli Prime Minister's office released a statement on May 12th claiming that repairs would be completed within 2 to 3 weeks and that water supply would return to normal levels by early June. Derister Arbaks. That statement is, to put it charitably, optimistic to the point of being misleading. I have reviewed technical assessments from desalination engineering firms, and the reality is far more complex. The Sorek facility suffered catastrophic damage to its high-pressure pump systems. These are not off-the-shelf components. They are custom manufactured pumps designed specifically for high-capacity reverse osmosis systems, each weighing approximately 12 tons and requiring precision installation and calibration. According to industry sources, the lead time for manufacturing and delivering replacement pumps of this specification is 12 to 16 weeks, not including installation and testing time. The Hadera plant sustained damage to its membrane array systems. A reverse osmosis desalination plant uses thousands of individual membrane elements arranged in pressure vessels. The strike at Hadera compromised an estimated 40% of the membrane arrays in the primary treatment train. While membrane elements themselves can be replaced relatively quickly, the structural damage to the pressure vessel housings and the contamination of the entire system with seawater and debris means the entire affected section must be dismantled, cleaned, inspected, and rebuilt. Engineering estimates suggest 60 to 90 days minimum. Energy infrastructure is another critical bottleneck. Desalination is extraordinarily energy intensive. The Sorek plant alone consumes approximately 15 megawatts of electricity during operation. The strikes deliberately targeted the electrical substations that supply power to these facilities. Israel Electric Corporation has confirmed that rebuilding the damaged substations will require at least 8 weeks due to the specialized transformers and switchgear required. Defense Security Asia and multiple Israeli engineering sources are reporting that realistic timelines for returning even 2 of the 4 plants to full operational capacity are 12 to 16 weeks. That means that through the summer months, June, July, August, when water demand in Israel peaks due to heat and agricultural needs, the country will be operating at approximately 40 to 50% of normal desalinated water capacity. Think carefully about what this represents. This is not a temporary disruption. This is a sustained infrastructure crisis that will affect Israeli society through the peak demand season. And the attackers knew this. The timing, mid-May, just before summer, the target selection, facilities with the longest repair timelines, the precision of the strikes, maximum damage to critical components. This was planned with an understanding of vulnerability windows that most analysts believed did not exist. Received. That is announcement number 2. Announcement number 3, and this one almost nobody in the mainstream media is connecting correctly. The intelligence required to execute this operation did not come from satellite imagery or open source research. It came from inside knowledge of facility operations, maintenance schedules, and security protocols. Here is what we know. The strikes occurred during a shift change at 3 of the 4 facilities. At Sorek, the strike hit at 11:47 p.m. local time, precisely during the transition between the evening and night maintenance crews. At Hadera, the strike occurred at 12:32 a.m., again during a shift transition. This is not coincidence. Shift changes are the most vulnerable security windows at any industrial facility. Personnel are moving in and out, access controls are being cycled, attention is divided. The munitions struck specific buildings within each facility complex. At Sorek, the strike hit Building C7, which houses the high-pressure pump systems, not the administrative building, not the storage tanks, not the pre-treatment facility. Building C7. At Hadera, the strike hit the membrane array housing in Section 3B. These are not targets you select from satellite imagery. These are targets you select from facility blueprints and operational knowledge. Israeli security services are reportedly investigating the possibility of insider intelligence, either through human sources with direct facility access or through penetration of the industrial control systems used to manage plant operations. According to reporting by The Times of Israel, Shin Bet has launched an internal review of all personnel with access to critical infrastructure facilities going back 18 months. The reason this matters is the same reason the Stuxnet cyber attack on Iranian nuclear facilities mattered a decade ago. It reveals a level of intelligence capability that fundamentally changes the calculation of vulnerability. If your adversary has detailed knowledge of your most critical infrastructure, down to shift schedules and building layouts, then every facility, every power plant, every water treatment center, every telecommunications hub becomes a potential target. The psychological impact of that realization on Israeli security planning cannot be overstated. Received. That is announcement number 3. Now, let's talk about what is really happening behind the headlines, because there are 2 stories playing out simultaneously, and the mainstream media is only covering one of them. The first story is the one you are hearing. Emergency water rationing, repair efforts underway, government assures public. The second story, the one we are about to examine, is about what this reveals about Israel's strategic vulnerabilities in an era of precision strike capabilities and infrastructure warfare. Israel's defense establishment has spent decades and tens of billions of dollars building one of the most sophisticated air defense systems in the world. Iron Dome intercepts short-range rockets. David Sling handles medium-range threats. Arrow 3 targets ballistic missiles. Together, these systems have achieved interception rates above 90% in previous conflicts. And yet, 4 precision strikes penetrated these defenses and hit 4 critical infrastructure targets in a 6-hour window. Israeli defense forces have not provided detailed information on whether the munitions were detected, whether interception was attempted, or why the strikes were successful. That silence is itself revealing. If the strikes had been detected and interception had failed due to technical malfunction, IDF would likely have said so and blamed the specific system. If the strikes had been detected and deliberately not intercepted because they were misidentified as non-threatening, that would have been acknowledged. The silence suggests the strikes were either not detected until impact or were delivered through a methodology that existing defense systems are not optimized to counter. Regional defense analysts speaking on background have suggested several possibilities. Low-altitude cruise missiles using terrain masking flight profiles. Drone swarms that saturate detection systems through sheer numbers. Hypersonic glide vehicles that compress decision-making time below human reaction capability. We do not know which. But what we do know is that 4 critical targets were struck despite Israel's layered air defenses. And that fact is being studied very carefully in Tehran, in Beirut, in Damascus, and in Ankara. Think about the strategic implications. If desalination plants located in urban areas along the coast, protected by multiple air defense layers, can be successfully targeted, then what infrastructure cannot be targeted? Power generation plants, natural gas terminals. To do the Trans-Israel pipeline, the Eilat-Ashkelon oil pipeline, the Mediterranean offshore gas platforms. Every piece of critical infrastructure that makes modern Israel function is now theoretically targetable with precision munitions that air defense systems may not reliably intercept. This is not a military defeat in the traditional sense. This is something potentially more damaging, the revelation of systemic vulnerability. And the Israeli government knows it. Prime Minister's office has been notably restrained in its rhetoric, no threats of massive retaliation, no promises to eliminate the attackers, just assurances about repairs and resilience. That restraint is not weakness. It is the behavior of a government that has been strategically surprised and is recalculating its options. If you are an Israeli household right now, watching your tap run dry after hitting your daily quota, watching grocery prices spike as agricultural disruption hits supply chains, watching government officials struggle to explain how this happened, what is occurring is not a foreign policy story. It is an immediate personal crisis that calls into question fundamental assumptions about security and stability. This pattern has repeated throughout history, and every time it repeats, the outcome is the same. A technologically superior power builds elaborate defenses to protect against the threats it expects. And then an adaptive adversary finds the undefended vulnerability and exploits it with devastating effect. The Peloponnesian War. At Sarsti, Athens and Sparta went to war. 27 years. Athens had the superior navy, controlled the seas, built the long walls connecting the city to the port of Piraeus so they could never be besieged. Impregnable, they thought. And then Sparta did not besiege the walls. They ravaged the Athenian countryside, destroyed the agricultural base, forced the population into the city where plague struck. Athens' walls stood intact while the society inside them collapsed. Both sides were exhausted. And who won? Persia, which had been funding Sparta, quietly reclaimed influence over the Greek world it had lost at Marathon and Salamis. The parallel here is exact. Israel has built Iron Dome, David's sling, arrow, impregnable air defense, they thought. And the strikes did not come as the massive rocket barrages these systems were designed to counter. They came as precision attacks against the infrastructure dependencies, water, that air defense cannot protect. Israel's defenses stand intact while the society they are meant to protect faces a resource crisis that could force strategic concessions. The attackers expended minimal resources for precision strikes to create disproportionate impact. And who benefits? Regional actors who gain leverage without the political cost of mass civilian casualties, and external powers who are watching Israeli vulnerabilities being mapped in real time. So where does this leave us? Let me give you 3 clear paths because there is no honest middle ground here. Path 1, rapid repair and normalization. Israel mobilizes emergency resources, airlifts replacement components from Europe and the United States, completes repairs in 6 to 8 weeks rather than 12 to 16, implements enhanced security protocols at all critical infrastructure sites, and demonstrates that this was a tactical setback, but not a strategic vulnerability. This path requires extraordinary mobilization, international cooperation, and frankly, luck that no further strikes occur during the repair window. I assess the probability of this path at approximately 25%. It is possible, but it requires everything to go right. Path 2, extended crisis and strategic adaptation. Repairs take the full 12 to 16 weeks. Israel endures a summer of severe water rationing and agricultural losses. Public pressure mounts on the government and strategic calculations shift. Israel may seek negotiated arrangements, tacit or explicit, that trade constraints on its freedom of action for guarantees against further infrastructure targeting. This is the path of strategic coercion, where asymmetric attacks create political pressure that conventional military force cannot. I assess this path at approximately 50% probability. It is the most likely scenario based on current engineering realities and political dynamics. Path 3, escalation and regional conflict. Israel determines that the strategic vulnerability revealed by these strikes is intolerable, identifies the source of the attack with sufficient confidence, and launches major retaliatory operations designed to eliminate the threat at its source. This path risks broader regional conflict, potentially drawing in actors who have thus far remained on the sidelines. I assess this path at approximately 25% probability. It is possible, particularly if additional infrastructure strikes occur or if domestic political pressure forces the government's hand, but it carries enormous risks that Israeli leadership is aware of. I think we are closer to path 2 than the headlines suggest. The engineering reality of repair timelines, the restraint in official rhetoric, the focus on resilience rather than retaliation, all of these indicators point to a government preparing for extended disruption rather than rapid resolution. But the situation is fluid. A second wave of strikes, a major domestic political crisis, or unexpected developments in repair efforts could shift the trajectory quickly. Here are the questions I want you to take away. First, how does Israel protect infrastructure that is geographically dispersed, operationally essential, and apparently vulnerable to precision strikes that evade existing air defenses? Second, what does this operation reveal about intelligence penetration of Israeli critical infrastructure systems, and what other facilities might be similarly vulnerable? Third, how do democracies manage public expectations and maintain social cohesion during extended infrastructure crises that affect daily life in fundamental ways? Tell me in the comments what you think the Israeli government does next. Tell me if you think this represents a new phase of infrastructure warfare that will become the model for future conflicts. We will keep tracking every development in Israel's water crisis, in regional security dynamics, and in the evolution of asymmetric warfare tactics. That is what this analysis does every single day. Subscribe now. It is sorted into dirt. Share this analysis with everyone in your network who is trying to understand what is actually happening beneath the headlines in this conflict. Turn on notifications so you do not miss the next update, and we will see you in the next video.